So I've been playing a lot of Marathon lately. I've put about 100 hours into the game now, and the reason I'm making this video is because at this point I can now definitively say exactly what my conclusions are on Marathon, and because Bungie, after the release of Marathon, was highly encouraging people and imploring them to wait until Cryo Archive, which is their endgame content, releases before making any reviews or impressions on the game. And I made a video after about 20 hours giving my impressions, but now I can definitively say, now that I've experienced the entire gameplay loop, the end game content, and really what this is all about when you get, to the highest power curves in the game, now we no longer have to wonder if there's something we're missing out on or a part of the gameplay loop that we haven't yet experienced, so it's not time to do a review. We've experienced what there is going to be in the game now, and I think everything else from the rest of the live service season is going to be variations on what we've played. So anyways, just a really quick recap for people who are unfamiliar with Marathon. Marathon is an extraction game in which the entire goal is to load into an area, get as much gear as possible, either by killing other real players or fighting enemies in the environment, and gathering as much equipment as you can and successfully extracting out of the map safely in order to keep all of that gear. You can then choose to bring that newly acquired gear into your next match, but if you die, obviously you're going to lose it all. So the entire gameplay loop is the risk reward of bringing in gear to get more gear, but not trying to die, as you will lose everything if you do. Now, Cryo Archive is not fundamentally different in this way than the rest of the game. I talked about this in my other video, but the base game consists of Perimeter, Dire Marsh, and Outpost. And Outpost is the most difficult version of, the PvE experience, and it's the most complicated map. Perimeter and Dire Marsh, by comparison, are a lot more chilled out. These are, a little easier experiences, but the loot isn't going to be quite as good as it is in Outpost. The more difficult the area, the potential better loot that you can get. Now, I'm sure most of you probably know that, or if you've played the game, then you're already deeply familiar with all of these areas, and that is important because I wanted to bring everybody up to speed so that the rest of the context of this video makes sense. Now, before I get to some of my criticisms and ultimately my conclusion on Marathon, I want to give Bungie credit where it's due because they made a game that checks a lot of boxes for me personally. They made a game that is downright beautiful to look at, one that has an extremely unique art style that for a lot of people is going to be the very thing keeping them coming back. The aesthetic is unique like no other. You're not going to see anything like this in another game, and the art has been something that has just drawn me back in time and again. This also goes hand in hand with the world building and all of the storytelling. A lot of it is, very obscure things in game that you kind of have to go digging for. While there are moments when you're doing your factions where they'll talk to you and give you lore as well, you have to do things in game to acquire more, and you can go into your codex and read a lot of stuff, and it's like you kind of have to put in your own work to figure out what's going on in the game, and I really like a video game like that. So that's another box checked for me. The core gameplay loop is also fundamentally solid. Bungie knows how to make shooters. That's never really been an issue, and I never thought that was going to be the problem when Marathon, before the game came out. But most importantly, I feel the thing that has kept me coming back, you don't play a game for 100 hours that you really don't like at all. The thing that's kept me on the game is that it's a challenging game. It's surprisingly hardcore for what I thought Bungie was going to go for a console market shooter. I was expecting something, not exactly something as hardcore as Escape from Tarkov, but definitely not what we got. But at the same time, that is an aspect I'm really enjoying and find incredibly refreshing. It's putting me at that optimal challenge state where it feels good to try to improve and get better. There's a lot to learn about the game, and I really appreciate them making a game for a specific kind of audience. If you're somebody like me and you have my taste in video games, then you will probably really click with Marathon. Also, I mentioned this in my prior video, but the PvP aspect is lovely in Marathon. It's actually the best part of the game. I mean, insofar as Cryo Archive does have some cool PvE stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but generally speaking, the best part of the gameplay loop is actually the PvP fights, and that is not what I was expecting to happen, but is literally the highlight of the game. And I've been keeping an eye on the Steam charts of Marathon. I know that's like a meme now, to watch the Steam charts, but I've been doing it just because I've been curious to see what the player retention is like, because this game is designed for player retention, which is actually one of my criticisms we'll get to later. But I mean, I sort of saw this coming, that the game launched and maybe it didn't have the biggest player base we've ever seen at its peak, but at the same time, I mean, this graph is aggressively steady. People are coming back on every day. It has its audience audience, it's found its market, and it is slightly more niche than maybe they were expecting given the budget of this game. But at the same time, it's not like it's Concord 3, right? It just didn't die on launch. It has a steady player base of people that are coming back every day. With that being said, I don't think it's going to reach very many new players. And that is for a lot of reasons I'll get to in a minute. But what I will definitively say about the gameplay and the just actual gameplay loop of Marathon is that it's really solid, it's pretty polished, and it's just genuinely fun, right? And the maps have gotten better as they've come out. Right when Marathon dropped, we only had access to Perimeter and Dire Marsh, and like, while they're decent maps, they get old pretty quick, and once you've played other stuff like Outpost or even Cryo Archive, you basically have no desire to go back to any of these maps, maybe even Outpost at this point. When Outpost dropped, it was highly praised for its complexity, its design, its world building, all of that. And Outpost is, again, genuinely fantastic. It's probably the best area in the base game. But that also means that Cryo Archive comes out and just completely obliterates Outpost. I mean, Cryo Archive is one of the most intelligently and deep designed maps I've ever seen in a video game, period. It's one of the most complex and intricate levels I think I've ever played. And all of that complexity and difficulty is necessary because all of the grinding you did in the base game on Perimeter, Dire Marsh, and Outpost, all of that gear, like, you needed a reason to use it, and that's what Cryo Archive is supposed to be, but still, it's the exact same gameplay idea. It doesn't do anything fundamentally different than those other areas. It's still, load in, get as much gear as you can, and extract, but there's a lot of ways you can do that, obviously from other players, but there's also vaults in Cryo Archive, and this is the thing I really want to pin down, because that's what makes this area special. And if you're anything like me who really enjoys like secret areas and like Easter eggs and that kind of stuff, then these vaults are specifically what that is. You have to get a key from Outpost, which then you can take into Cryo Archive and do a very specific set of tasks to open a secret vault, which has like a lot of really good gear in Marathon. All of these vaults essentially have little puzzles that teach you different mechanics and prepare you for things later to come, which we'll talk about. But Cryo Archive is still the same idea as the rest of the game. So why is it a limited time mode only on the weekends? And why is it so damn difficult to get to all of these vaults? The thing is, one of my criticisms is I don't see realistically how anyone who isn't a hardcore gamer or plays video games for a living is ever going to experience some of this late game content. There is a final boss fight in Cryo Archive, which is the compiler. And truthfully, this is really cool. This is exactly the kind of stuff that I was wanting out of Marathon. It's what I was anticipating playing, and it's probably the highlight of the game. However, because of how many steps it takes to get here, and honestly the amount of luck you need on your side, because not only do you have to do all of these vaults at the same time as fending off other real players in runs, but you also have to get other keys for different vaults that are completely RNG dependent. So not only do you need to risk your gear going in there, but there's also not a guarantee that you'll be able to progress to the next vault. But with how much work is required into doing these, I genuinely don't see how anybody who isn't a hardcore player or a streamer is ever going to experience it. But at the same time, the compiler is basically a Destiny raid boss fight, which, to their credit, are always really good. These kinds of PvE encounters are exceptional. There's puzzles within them. There's a lot of complexity with the boss's moveset. They're amazing. And, you would think that after, playing for 60 or 70 hours, you would have access, to late game content, and essentially whenever you want, you've kind of earned the right to do that. But that's not really the case here. Because this is the first season at the moment, if you've already grinded and you have access to Cryo Archive, then of course, then you have access to endgame content, but that won't always be the case. In future seasons, they're going to wipe the game every couple of months, meaning all of your faction progress will go away, your entire, vault and all of your gear that you've got will also be deleted, and so you'll essentially have to grind the base game again to get back up to the ability to get to endgame content, whatever that ends up being in the future. Now, my issues with this are a few things. Number one, because of the nature of Marathon, I really don't think it's a game that is going to be drawing in tons of new players every couple of seasons, right? I think it's a game that has already found its audience and they're going to be the ones sticking around. I can't imagine a whole lot of new players picking up the game. And this is important because wipes are basically for not only the hardcore players to have that sense of progression and being able to grind back up again, but also it allows new players to not get completely obliterated in lobbies by gamers that have been, playing for a long time and have all of the best gear already. They would just get stomped. So of course, to some extent, it's necessary for the new player experience to be retained, but I just don't know how many new players are ever going to be joining Marathon. There's going to be some, but I don't think it's going to be a significant amount, and all it's really going to do, I think each wipe is going to churn more and more hardcore players that just frankly don't want to do that grind again, and I'm actually one of those people. I wish that this was a game that, because I've put like 100 hours into it at this point, and I've, gotten to the ability to experience endgame content, whenever they release endgame content every few seasons, that's when I'd like to check back in and play it. I don't want to have to grind the base game for 20, 30 hours again just to get the ability to get back to endgame. That's not something that really is appealing to me, and that's kind of my issue with it right now. This is what I'm talking about, case in point, when I say that this won't appeal to not hardcore gamers or people that only have a few hours to play, maybe on the weekends or something, because you simply won't have enough time to grind the game like it demands to experience a lot of this endgame content. And even if you do, it's not even a shoo-in to just go and experience it for yourself. Like I said, I've played the game for about 100 hours at this point, and I still have yet to do the compiler boss fight for myself. But speaking of this boss, as cool as this is, and as amazing as that experience is going to be, all that really happens at the end is you defeat the boss and then you get a ton of really good loot at the end. But again, if they're going to wipe the game every couple of months, you won't even get to keep this gear forever. Eventually this will go away. It's just basically getting exotic weapons after a Destiny raid, and that's kind of where I felt comfortable giving a final review on Marathon. Now that I've seen what happens after the end game content, you have a big boss fight, which is exciting, and then you get all of your loot, which is also really exciting. But beyond that, the only conclusion to really come to is that at that point, Marathon is just Destiny with extra steps. And again, don't get me wrong, I consider all of this to be good content. It's good gameplay stuff. It's a fantastic map and a really good boss fight from the looks of it, but it is something that, again, I truly don't think that I would be shocked if more than 1,000 or a couple of thousand players ever experience this boss, just because of how out of reach it is. And for the average gamer who, is only jumping on for a game or two every night, you may as well forget about it. This thing is never going to be within your reach. And that's just because of the way that they've, kind of gated it behind so many barriers to get to this stuff. It's kind of strange how they've done it this way, and I'm not entirely sure why they did. Now, the way that I would fix this, or the solution I would have, is if this game was more like Elden Ring Night Rain, and I'm going to be drawing some comparisons to this game because they're actually very similar in a lot of ways. Night Rain, when you bought the game, it has pretty much all of the content that it was going to have from day one, but the game was so new and honestly difficult that a lot of the player base hadn't figured out the game yet, so it took you a fair amount of time to learn it and then beat all the bosses, but they were all there from the beginning. Marathon is not going to have all of the content that you can experience until, they reset every season and they wipe the game and all that stuff. We have Cryo Archive right now for endgame, but probably in a couple months it'll be something else. But you'll need to grind all the way back up to be able to experience that, even if you've grinded the base game already. And personally, I just don't have any interest in grinding the base game again. And maybe I would have a little more interest in grinding the base game if it wasn't for some of the other problems I have with it. First of all, I don't always have friends that can jump on and play Marathon at any moment, so sometimes I just want to play by myself, but playing in a solo queue is absolutely horrible in this game. The solo experience is awful. All it is trying to get a moderate amount of gear. You can't even really get that much, even on optimized runs, really, and then you're just waiting for an assassin player who went invisible to rat you out at the last second. The only character anyone ever plays in solo is assassin now, because you can go invisible and just wait someone out from behind a corner and get an easy kill on them. At least in the cooperative setting, right, in 3 players, you can have actual gunfights, you can have interactions with all the different characters, and the PvP is much deeper that way. Solo is just not fun when it comes to the PvP standpoint. And this problem is just going to continue to get worse because players are getting better at the game, they're getting more optimized routes, they're understanding more, and they're just getting better overall. So lobbies are getting increasingly sweaty to a point where it's making solo almost unplayable now. And you can still play co-op just fine, obviously, but the PvP experience in solo is just downright miserable at this point. Not to mention, people have just really learned the maps now too. Everyone knows where all of the good gear is now, so everybody converges at the same point at basically the same time in the game now. now, and it's not really, an actual varied experience anymore. It's just running the same routes over and over again. So, and again, that is all essentially for getting the ability to grind endgame content. And as I've said earlier, the endgame content is good. Like, Cryo Archive is a objectively fantastic map, and I really enjoy playing it. And the fact that it has a massive like PvE boss encounter, which is basically a Destiny boss at the end, and that's amazing. But now we've seen what the end game entails, right? We know what happens. You defeat a boss, and then you get a ton of really exclusive gear behind it, which, again, as exciting as that is, it's basically Destiny with extra steps, right? It's the same kind of like looter shooter mechanic, except it's a PvP game now, and it's more extraction based. So ultimately, my final conclusion on Marathon is that it is objectively a really fun game. It's well made, and even if you don't like extraction shooters, there is a lot of fun gameplay to be had here still, and the PvP is just simply amazing. Like, it's fantastic, even so much so that I think it's actually a shame that there isn't another mode or even some kind of like arena shooter to experience this, because just it's so good, and to only relegate it to extraction mechanics just feels a little bit wasteful to me. But also, Marathon does have a lot of problems to face right now. Solos are in a really bad spot, and in my honest opinion, the average gamer can't even dream about getting to a lot of this really cool endgame content. Just not only Cryo Archive, but more specifically the compiler boss fight. It's just so out of reach for the average gamer, and how much, upfront time and effort is required to even get the ability to get there, that I just don't see most people ever doing that, even though admittedly it is good content and a lot of people would probably enjoy it. But at the same time, again, it is what it is. I know they didn't make a game for everybody, and to some extent I can definitely appreciate that. But I think I'm going to play Marathon for the rest of this season. I think I'm going to continue to enjoy it as long as Cryo Archive is around, and I'm going to do the compiler boss fight and everything. But after they wipe the game, and if I have to like re-grind the base game over and over again, at that point, I'm done. I think that I will probably play up until I beat the compiler and they wipe the game, and then that'll be it for me. Now that I've seen and experienced the gameplay loop at its finest, I think I'm satisfied on that. It's not that I didn't enjoy myself or that it's a bad game or anything like that. In fact, quite the opposite. But I don't think it'll be bringing anything new to the table, and it requires such a hefty time investment to get back to this experience that I just have a lot of other stuff that I also want to be playing that I don't know if I can justify doing that as well. So anyways, that's my final word on Marathon. Amazing game with a fantastic world that I've been really invested in, but it's probably not something that I'm going to stick around and play for months or even years. I think I've kind of had my fill after the season, and I've seen what it has to offer, and I enjoyed myself, but I can probably safely put it down and say I'm satisfied with that. Marathon is the best game that I never want to play again.